Hi there, my name is Jacob Irwin, and I work at Benefits by Design. I'm pleased to be joined today by Mike McClenahan, one of BBD's managing partners, who will be talking about our Benepac product and how it helps keep Canadians healthy and financially secure. Stick around after the main presentation for a question and answer session. At BBD, we firmly believe that there are no silly questions, ever. If you do have a question, please type it into the GoToWebinar question interface, and we will do our best to address them at the end of the webinar. This webinar is being recorded. You'll receive a follow-up email with a link to the recording after the webinar. If you have any questions or concerns about this webinar, please contact us at socialmedia@bbd.ca. Mike has been with BBD for 20 years, and in that time, he's seen our company and our products grow exponentially. He is currently serving as the president of the Third Party Administrators Association of Canada, better known as TPAC, and he is also an avid hiker, biker, and general adventurer, and recently went on a week-long trip to New York City with his daughter Grace. And so, without further ado, let me welcome our speaker, Mike McClenahan.
Thank you, Jake. We really appreciate everybody taking time out of their busy day, and it's still summer out there, so even more so for attending sort of our final week of summer before the long weekend. And I hope everybody has had a fantastic summer. So yeah, I'm excited to talk about one of our original products, so we will jump right into it. From an overview standpoint, a little bit of agenda. We're going to start, as I say, with a bit of an overview of the product and talk about what Benepac is exactly. And of course, why would employers want a Benepac style program? Finally, expand a little more detail on the Benepac solution, how it fits into the marketplace, and also stick around near the end. We should be about half an hour in total with the webinar, but I'm going to share some sales ideas that we have collected from advisors that we work with across the country in terms of how they have taken advantage of Benepac to grow their own business. And we'll have some time at the end, as Jake alluded to, for some question and answers. So with that said, I hope you'll indulge me, and we're going to jump in a little bit of a time machine. For people like myself who have been around as long as I have, Benepac is actually 20 years old. And so I thought maybe we'd take a look at what was going on 20 years ago. Well, interestingly enough, for you soccer fans out there, or footy as I like to say, France won the World Cup. And if you were watching this year, they did it again. So it's an interesting analogy in the sense that some things maybe don't change over a 20-year time period, whether you like that outcome or not. Another thing, this little movie of a Titanic proportion, don't worry, the jokes just get worse, was the big blockbuster success 20 years ago and broke all sorts of box office records. We had Google launched. I always find this one interesting because it seems like Google is ubiquitous or has been around forever, but it was actually launched 20 years ago. And in fact, this is what the original home page of Google looked like. And in some respects, you might like to say, it hasn't really evolved that much, but still is used by millions and millions of people on a daily basis. And this little fella was first put into space. So for those of you who recognize this picture, this is what the original International Space Station looked like. And it was a joint project between the US and the Russians. Of course, of late, they are doing different joint projects, but that's of a less cooperative nature. And staying with that sort of metaphor of some things don't change, but some things do, this is actually what the space station looks like today. So it has evolved significantly. And the same could be said of Benepac. So let's talk about that a little bit. So I mentioned 20 years ago, we launched Benepac. And over that 20-year period, it's been providing Canadians with benefits that help keep their employees healthy, financially secure. And I would say that Benepac fits into what we might refer to as something of a traditional style plan. And we're going to talk a little bit about defined benefit and defined contribution in a few minutes. But it has certainly evolved over that time period as well. And one of the places that it has evolved is size. So when we first had Benepac in place 20 years ago, we had $4 million of annual premium under administration. And at that time, we were actually only in one province, just in BC. And then we expanded. And over that 20-year time period, Benepac has grown to encompass over 3,000 employers and $76 million of annual premium. And quite simply, we couldn't have done it without the support of all of you, our advisor partners. So truly want to thank you for the support you've shown us over the many years. So I alluded to this idea of a spectrum. And you can see on the left-hand side, we have the words defined benefit. On the right-hand side, defined contribution. And historically, that's a terminology that's often used in the pension industry. But it can equally be applied to the group life and health side of the business as well. And so for context here, when I'm referring to this, I'm mostly talking about the health and dental benefits, less so the insurance benefits like life and disability and so on. And when an employer, along with the advice from their advisor, is looking at what style of plan they should have, there's all sorts of considerations that should be taken into account. And here's some of them. It's certainly not intended to be an exhaustive list, but funding considerations or cash flow obviously plays a significant role in terms of the design of the program. Demographics can be a big component. An example there might be that we've seen where perhaps the demographics is predominantly single employees and maybe even a younger demographic, they may lean towards more of a defined contribution component, things like health spending accounts and so on. Obviously, whether they're unionized or non-unionized plays a huge role. When they're in a unionized world, obviously the collective bargaining agreement is, likely the key determining factor of what the design looks like. Industry as well, and employer philosophy. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that sort of idea, the employer's philosophy or objectives, in a few minutes when we take a look at an industry survey that gives us some thoughts in that area. So now when we move along to looking at where does Benepac and Benefits by Design's product and solutions offering fit into the spectrum, certainly Benepac, as I mentioned before, exists more in that traditional world, and when it was launched 20 years ago, would be very close to that defined benefit end of the spectrum when it comes again to health and dental benefits. Number of years later, was actually in 2005, we launched a program called Ben Account. And again, the idea there being that it's a health spending account that's paired with a high deductible, catastrophic, but insured health plan. So it's not all the way over to the defined contribution side because it still has an insurance component. More recently, we launched a program called Standalone. And as the name suggests, it very much does fit in that defined contribution end of the spectrum. But the other thing too, and we'll talk more about this in a minute, Benepac itself can be customized and it has the flexibility to incorporate defined contribution components. So notionally, you can have a program like this where you still have an insured health and perhaps dental program, but that it's paired with some defined contribution components like a healthcare spending account or a personal spending account or wellness account as well. So I talked a little bit about this survey, and some of you, if you look at the bottom of the slide there, will be familiar with the Sanofi Canada Healthcare Survey. If you haven't had an opportunity to read it or go to one of their presentations in the past, strongly recommend that you look into it. Has a really valuable information in terms of feedback from both employers and employees who are members of benefits programs and their perceptions and thoughts around various aspects of benefit offerings. So for today, I'm just sort of picking up on a couple of pieces. And one of the things that was interesting from this year's survey, and it's consistent and resonates with the same sort of sentiment from a few prior years, is how employers value, so the rating, if you will, that they give to their benefits plan and how it correlates with certain other offerings. So what you can see here is that where the benefits program incorporates some form of a wellness program or a healthcare spending account, employers put a much higher rating positively on their perception of their benefits program. And I'll flip quickly over to the employee one here, and you get the same two components from an employee perception. So that's really nice to see because you have an alignment there, which isn't always the case, between both the employer's views as well as the employees. And this is really good third-party material that when you're out there speaking with your clients, they may have an existing benefits program, or they may be considering putting in a program for the first time. There's some very good data here. I'm going to flip back to the employer one here, and I alluded to this previously, but you see that specific objectives for a plan. And I think that's a very important consideration. So in the sense that, even though things have progressed from a technology standpoint, and there's certainly a lot more flexibility available in benefits plans, helping work with employers around the objectives of their program and revisiting that, probably at least on an annual basis, makes a lot of sense. As one advisor we work with in Ontario actually said to me, we were chatting about, we happened to be attending the event, and he said, absolutely the old school, as he called it, still works. Advisors have to keep up with technology and all that, but a good old-fashioned discussion on the objectives of the program should still be a priority. Okay. So we talked about the employee one here, that last point around job satisfaction. My instinct tells me that's more of a correlation than a causality, but intuitively it makes sense that if employees are satisfied with their job, they're probably going to give a better rating to something like their benefits program as well. So let's talk a little bit about the third-party administrator advantage and the industry, or TPA, as it's sometimes short formed. And in fact, I'm going to change it up here because at Benefits by Design, we actually like to refer to ourselves as an administered benefits agency, not to be confused with a Swedish disco band from the 1970s. Oh, don't worry, I'm not going to sing, but I could steal a bad metaphor there, and for those ABBA fans out there, say, take a chance on us. But as I said, the jokes just get worse. So one of the advantages, certainly, that a third-party administrator or administered benefits agency has, in our case, we refer to ourselves that way because the administered refers to the fact that we do administration services. Benefits is that that's what we do, and that's what we provide from a solutions, only workplace-based benefits. And the agency, probably the most important one, referring to the fact that for Benefits by Design, our distribution is solely through group-focused advisors across Canada. But when we talk about the advantages of a TPA or an administered benefits agency, certainly that best-in-class component, and I'll talk in a second about the supplier partners that we're with. But in Benefits by Design's case, one of the things as well is that benefits are rated independently. So because of this, it means that the pricing essentially stands alone. Whereas you find sometimes with some of the larger insurance carriers, if you get a quote from them, so say you're dealing with a prospect that doesn't have a benefits program today, you're looking to provide them with a sort of suite of the options that are available. So you may quote just about every benefit available. But then when it comes to the client actually making a decision on what to implement, they may choose to change some things, remove certain benefits, and often then you have to get the whole program requoted. In our case, so I'll use an example, you've quoted life, insurance, accidental death, disability, health, and dental. And let's say they decide to proceed with everything but the dental, maybe they put in a healthcare spending account in replacement. So the quote on the other benefits and the pricing doesn't change in respect to that. So that's certainly one of the advantages that third-party administrators have. Chatting a little more about the Benefits by Design advantage and who we are, well, we, as many of you know who have dealt with us in years past, are not your typical benefits company. We're very proud of our culture of wellness, and we practice what we preach. You can see from some of the photos here that our culture is not our only advantage. Benefits by Design, as a third-party administrator, it gives us certain capabilities in the marketplace. So when we look at who we partner with, and you can see here we have the partner suppliers listed on the left-hand side. So Empire Life, who we transitioned to earlier this year, handle our life insurance and our disability benefits. Green Shield Canada, who we're proud to say we've worked with for over 15 years, is our primary supplier for health and dental benefits and exclusively for our Benepac program. Industrial Alliance handles our accidental death and dismemberment, our critical illness coverage, something called diagnostic specialist access insurance, and some other innovative special risk programs. Red to HR is our business assistance program provider, and Humanicare, who we moved to last fall, it would have been, provides our second opinion service, which is embedded in the life insurance product we have. Preferred partners, so Alliance and Costco Pharmacy. Think of Alliance as the sort of virtual supplier when it comes to prescriptions, and Costco is more the bricks and mortar. And again, if you have any questions about those, how they work and how they can benefit your customers, please do reach out to your friendly Benefits by Design regional director. And Your Workplace Magazine, who are an innovative organization based in Kingston. And as many of you know, they provide small business focused articles and magazines, which we provide free of charge to your customers on their 1-year anniversary with their Benepac program. Okay, so now let's take a look at how these different pieces and components can be combined into sort of a benefits building block. We've talked about Benepac as sort of building blocks, so I'm going to use a bit of a Lego analogy here. And if you consider each benefit as its own block, you can begin to build a plan that can be structured to suit the individual needs of your client. So to illustrate, let's look at an example. And this might be something that could be sort of a starter plan for a organization that doesn't currently have a benefits program. So it's not unusual that they might have some life insurance and accidental death, layering on the healthcare side as well as the dental, and perhaps finally some dependent life insurance as well. And so again, you put that all together and it leads to a fairly comprehensive starter program. So they may want something a little more, and certainly income protection can be a key consideration for both plan sponsors, the employers, and their employees. So then it might not be unusual that they layer in some disability coverage. For tax reasons, as you know, they may have the employees actually pay the cost of that. And that could include both long-term disability as well as short-term disability coverage as well. So let's look at another one. And this one's a little different, I guess I'd say. Here's a program that has healthcare, no dental on an insured basis, but instead that defined contribution component through a healthcare spending account and or a wellness account, critical illness, and an employee assistance program. And one of the things you might notice about this program is that you don't see any life insurance or accidental death coverage. And again, that goes back to the idea that because we partner with different providers and the benefits stand alone, unlike most of the larger insurer plans, you don't have to have life insurance and AD&D, despite the fact there may be value in that and they may want to incorporate it, but it does speak to the flexibility of the Benepac program. So the possibilities on that basis are almost endless as a result of Benepac not essentially having a core plan. And the other thing that can happen, as much as you see that sort of plan on the right-hand side, and that's soup to nuts. That's just about everything that we can provide within a benefits program. And again, as you work with your customers over a period of years, their benefits needs and desires and funding considerations may evolve. So it's not unusual that they may start in a fairly basic manner and may evolve and enhance the plan over time. And certainly Benepac can grow with your customers in that respect. Another advantage of the program is for groups as small as 3 employees, there are essentially guaranteed coverage. Many of you will be familiar with the terminology of non-medical coverage, so you can see it's listed here. But again, as small as 3 employees, we can provide a wide range of benefit offerings on a non-medical basis. Of course, employees can top up beyond the non-medical if they're eligible. So I mentioned earlier at the beginning that I was going to share some sales ideas. So let's jump into some of those. First area we'll take a look at is dental. And so two ideas listed here. ASO, industry terminology again, but administered services only, or otherwise known as self-funded. And we're seeing more and more opportunities where the employer, along with, again, the advice from the advisor, may say, dental isn't really insurance, it's more of a cash flow benefit. So we end up with what we call sort of split funding arrangements. So for groups of 10 employees or more, we can actually maintain the health on an insured basis, but have the dental structured on a self-funded or ASO basis. And again, I'd encourage you, if you have more questions on that, to certainly talk to your BBD regional director. The tiered dental max, I think of that one as one of our sort of best kept secrets, and it's a innovative green shield feature. And it can be especially useful in situations where you're dealing with an industry with high turnover. Could be restaurant, could be retail, and this kind of thing. And in those situations, and you probably come across this before, where you put in a new program for a group which includes an insured dental plan, and you get to the first year renewal and the claims have gone through the roof, because all those employees, it's been years since they've had a dental plan. And so the way the tiered dental max works is that and it's tied to the employee's effective date, not the plans. So when the employee becomes eligible for the program, and I'll use an example. Let's say the maximum under the plan for the dental is $1,500 a year. So in the first year of being on the plan, that employee's maximum is 50%, or $750 in this example, of the normal maximum. Now, if they're still there at the end of the year, then their coverage automatically bumps up to the full maximum of 1,500. And what's neat about this one is that it not only helps protect against sort of abuse within the plan from a high claim standpoint, but also allows that employer to effectively reward those employees for their loyalty after the year. Paramedicals, similar to the dental, there's a lot of thought in our industry today that, again, paramedicals, not really insurance, tax-effective way employers can help fund those sort of semi-predictable expenses or claims. And we're seeing more cases where advisors will design programs that they may move to a combined maximum. We also have the option that the paramedical coverage can be completely stripped out of the plan from an insured basis. And we see a number of cases now where they'll take those savings and they will funnel those dollars to, again, a healthcare spending account type arrangement. So again, speaking to the flexibility. Catastrophic plans. So I alluded to BeneAccount before, which is that program of defined contribution, health spending account with a high deductible program. But if for whatever reason your customer said, oh, that's interesting, but I'd like to tweak that a bit or design it a little differently, there are a number of options within Benepac itself where you can effectively design your own catastrophic plan, a high deductible one, free up dollars, again, for other purposes, defined contribution or otherwise. Sometimes we'd love to be able to provide disability coverage to every industry. Unfortunately, that's not always possible. And so here's an example, again, of one that from a flexibility standpoint, you can be fairly creative. And the example I'm aware of was actually a long haul truck driving company. And part of it too was that some of the drivers were in a class, like they were contractors as opposed to being traditional employees. So traditional long-term disability coverage just wasn't an option. So with Benepac, one of the things you can do is you can actually enhance the accidental death and dismemberment benefit. It doesn't have to be equal to the life insurance. So in this case, what they did is they had still the flat 25,000 of life insurance coverage, but they beefed the AD&D up to 100,000 and then paired it with a critical illness benefit. So to create sort of a, again, it's not disability coverage, I want to be clear on that, but something that if there was an accident, there's a higher level of coverage. And then if there's an illness, that's where the critical illness steps in. Last couple of ideas. One would be pooled and standalone. So standalone, again, being that very pure defined contribution for health and dental, but then still you've got the insurance dollars to cover insurance risk. So we see a number of cases now where they may have the pooled benefits, so life insurance, AD&D, disability, perhaps critical illness, and then it's paired up with a standalone defined contribution type program. And executive benefits. So this is the last sort of sales idea, but again, one of the things you don't have to do is the benefits don't have to be the same for all classes of employees. Now, that's not anything particularly new in our industry, but we'll see examples where advisors are being even more creative in this area, and they may have designed, let's say, an executive coverage or managers, which includes certain benefits like the diagnostic specialist access insurance. We can even enhance the travel benefit beyond the standard 60 days for an exec class. Maybe they're doing more traveling. And then it's not unusual that you'll see some component of defined contribution enhanced for that executive group, whether using Cost Plus or some form of enhanced healthcare spending account as well. So small business, as we like to say, we certainly love small business, and we are one as well. Benefits by Design would certainly fit into that category. Little note, don't forget that October is actually Small Business Month in Canada, so good opportunities for you to do some shout outs to your customers. And because we're a small business and we behave like one, because we is one, we tend to think about what is it that small businesses want. So I'll touch on a couple of components here that are included within Benepac to help your small business clients. One is, especially for companies we tend to find that are say under 25, 50 employees, they don't tend to have a dedicated HR assistance. So with our Red Tape program, you get the business assistance program embedded, unlimited HR counseling, as well as things like the legal advice and the accounting advice, as well as all the tools for the employees themselves. The other thing we believe is they want healthy employees. And we were really excited and have continued to be excited how they've enhanced it over the past number of years when Greenchill Canada launched their Change for Life portal. And this is their sort of gamification, earn points, great education components in there to help employees be healthier, both in mind and body. And we also have Benefits by Design's workplace wellness calendar. And again, reach out to your regional director and they'd be more than happy to share that with you, and you can share that content with your customers as well. And then finally, we believe that small business wants choice for their employees. And so we've continued to enhance our product and solution offerings through things like standalone and so on to allow for that choice, whether that's for things like wellness and gym memberships or other features. So finally, I'm excited to talk about a new feature we have to help make the sales process with Benepac and our other products as well even smoother. And I'm introducing Benefits by Design's online enrollment tool. So it gives you easy access from anywhere essentially in one portal, help save the paperwork, so the trees are happy about this one. And it makes for a quicker enrollment process for plan administrators and their plan members. You will be receiving, as Jake I think alluded to, some additional information about this tool in a follow-up email after this webinar. And one of the areas we find that this tool is especially useful is if you're dealing with a group who has what we would call a dispersed workforce, so they're maybe not all in one location. It can be very effective for helping to sign up the employees. So with that all said, I think that wraps it up. But Jake, I think maybe we have a few minutes for some questions.
Yeah, for sure. So just to remind everyone before we jump into the Q&A portion of the webinar that this webinar is being recorded and that it will be sent to you in our follow-up email. So as we go through Q&A, please keep submitting your questions through the GoToWebinar question interface. You can continue to do so as we go through the questions here. But we do have a couple. So Mike, question number one, does Benepac accommodate contract employees?
Oh, okay. Yes, is the short answer. And again, we actually have a document that helps with the called sort of a quoting FAQ. There are some rules around that you want to be cautious of. So essentially, if the contract employees are working exclusively for that employer, so that's probably the key component. And then there are various participation issues that you want to look at as well. But for the most part, we can accommodate contract employees. Certainly one of the things we always recommend is that the design of the benefits program for the contract employees be different from the regular employees. And often employers will have even more detailed questions than this, and they may be wise to also consult other professionals, whether that's their financial advisor, their accounting resources, just to make sure that it's being structured correctly on side for tax purposes and so on. But the short answer is yes.
Awesome. So we're at 2:30, but I think we can take a couple more questions. So I have one here submitted. Do original enrollment forms need to be submitted to BBD when using the online enrollment tool?
Darn, that might be one that stumps me because it's so new and I didn't design it. Okay, so one of the things I can comment, it's not directly answering the question, but I believe, and we'll get this confirmed out to all the attendees here, that if they're using the online enrollment tool, so back up, in the non-online enrollment tool, the traditional paper-based, yes, they submit them to us and we retain those, including things like the beneficiary designations, which are on the forms. With the use of the new online enrollment tool, so first off, it's not at the point yet where legally the beneficiary designation can be done, but we are exploring that. It's a provincial jurisdiction question as well. But I believe what we're doing is in those cases, having the employer retain that original record. So especially, and the key legal part again is the beneficiary designation. I think I got that right, but again, we will follow up and people will slap me if I got it wrong.
Awesome. We can perhaps take one or two more questions. So here's one. What is the minimum number of employees required for setup for a Benepac plan?
3.
3.
That's a short answer.
That is a short answer. Okay, let me just scan here. There's a couple more. Okay, so you talked about the TPA advantage and how you're able to select best-in-class providers. How do you determine what best-in-class is and how I or my clients know that they really are like best-in-class?
Oh, good question. You just have to trust us. No, there is that, but no, it's a great question. You know, much like if I was an advisor and facing my employer and the CFO, let's say, you know, you're recommending so and so, how do I know? You know, that you've done your due diligence and so on. So in the same breath, we do anticipate advisors asking us that question. And so one is behind the scenes, somewhat certainly, and it's especially sort of run or led by our underwriting team. So on about a 5-year basis, it depends on a few other variables, but even if we are very pleased with the arrangement we have or the supplier we're working with a particular line, we put them through a regular vetting process, which may include soliciting quotes and proposals from other providers. We often will use external actuaries for the financial information on that. And a good example of that, I'll use 2 actually. So Green Shield, you know, put them through that process a number of times, but over time it has enhanced the relationship and led to more competitive offerings. And that's why we're still pleased to be working with them 15 or more years later. But sometimes it results in a change. And as you know, we made the change February 1st of this year to Empire Life. But if you saw the behind the scenes part, that process from initial conversations was probably about an 18-month process. And very pleased with the outcome of that and our partnership with Empire Life, but that is a due diligence and a regular process that we put our suppliers through.
Awesome. And I actually did some kind of quick sleuthing while I was muted regarding the initial question for the enrollment forms.
Oh, did I get it right?
Yeah, you did. So your initial answer of completing the beneficiary form is correct, which will just need to be the original copy. So the full enrollment form will not need to be submitted in paper copy, but your answer, Mike, regarding the enrollment form and the beneficiary designation was correct. So that is good.
Well, there you go. As my business partner says, how's it go? Even a blind squirrel finds a nut every so often. So I got one right.
Perfect. We have one question, and I'm going to ask this one because I think it's a quick one. does Benepac allow for couple rates?
Oh, okay. Again, short answer, yes. And not only for couples in sort of the traditional way you might think of it, like let's say spouses, common law or married, but also one of the nice features is that a couple rate can be applied to a single parent with one child. And sometimes you'll see situations where employers just feel that's a more equitable approach. So in other words, you would have the people, the family people, if you will, who have more than one dependent are paying a slightly higher rate overall because you're still trying to generate the same overall premium. But that the couples, whether again, husband, wife, or single parent scenario, are paying a slightly lower rate. So basically double the single rate at the end of the day. But the short answer is yes.
Great. So that's actually all the submitted questions. We did go a little over time, but hopefully everyone's okay with that and the answers they received, so that's perfect. I'd just like to say a big thank you to you, Mike, for coming on the webinar here and talking about our Benepac product. And thank you to all of our advisors and participants on the webinar today. Just take the rest of your day and please enjoy it. Thanks very much.
Yep. Enjoy the rest
Bye.
of your summer, everyone. Take care.